Hey everybody, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2022 Ford F-350, we're going to be showing you how to install the Airlift 7500 XL air helper springs for the rear axle. But before we do that, why don't we just check these out and see how they're going to work. What we like to do is just a couple of tests just to see how the truck handles with the airbags on. And so we actually have them installed already. And in a minute, we'll throw some weight in the bed of the truck and get it loaded down and see how it works. But I feel like it's often overlooked. How's your truck actually going to ride when you're not towing? You know, chances are good you're not going to be towing 24/7, right? And I feel like the ride quality would be important too in terms of that. So before we throw the weight in there, why don't we go ahead? We'll put the minimum pressure in our bags, which is about 5 psi. And just cruise around and see if you notice any difference in terms of, you know, the bags affecting just our overall comfort and drivability whenever we're unloaded. So inside the truck, we'll just kind of run through. We have a little test course actually with some bumps and stuff that we can hit. And I got 5 pounds of air in the bags, and we'll see if they make the truck any better or worse. I feel like they can't really get much worse. I mean, these things are pretty stiff right out of the box, you know. So I don't really see it affecting it too much, but I could be wrong. Honestly, as I go over these first few bumps, can't even tell they're back there. Honestly, can't tell any difference in terms of how stiff the truck is or anything like that compared to what it was factory. And so that's good. You know, you're not really going to get any ride improvements per se until you're weighted down. But I have heard complaints, and I've been in some trucks too. Usually the smaller, like the half-ton trucks, and you know they're all a little bit different, but where you put these airbags on and it's super stiff. And just truck is stiff, but that's how it is right out of the box anyway. So it's not a good or bad thing really. You know, it didn't make it worse or any better. So we're headed in the right direction. Now we can go do some evasive maneuvering and see how that feels. So I'm just gonna do some S-curves here. And like I said, we really shouldn't, hopefully not notice any difference, at least negatively. Honestly, to be honest with you, I think it might've got a little bit better than what it was. The truck almost felt just a little more planted. You know, it was a little more responsive almost. Little bit less body roll, that's what it felt like. So definitely not hurting anything in terms of just driving it around like normal. Maybe a very slight improvement there. So now's the real test. We got some weight in the bed of the truck. So this is about 250 gallons of water. So quite a bit of weight actually. I put it in there. You could definitely see the truck squat down. I put some more air in the bags. There's about 30 pounds of air roughly. Looks like that did the trick. Leveled it out, at least visually. And now let's hop in and run through that same course and see how it feels. So right away, even just hopping inside of the truck, with it being level, it feels comfortable, you know, with the way you'd want to drive. If you're watching this, you're probably familiar with trucks sagging down when you got all this weight or you're pulling a heavy trailer, and it's not ideal, you know, for overall performance. And if at nighttime, being level, our headlights are going to shine where we want them to go. So that's a good thing to see. And we're going to get going over our bumps here. So pretty good actually. Over these first couple, I like to get going and get some energy going through the chassis, and feels pretty good. Feels really good actually. Not too bad at all. You know, it feels, I don't know how I can describe this. It almost feels a little more forgiving. So, you know, you hit the bumps and instead of kind of slamming down and getting jostled, it's just kind of cushioned almost. And it feels like the suspension isn't working nearly as hard. So a little more comfortable for sure. And, you know, when that's the case, it's a more pleasant driving experience. So I think it's safe to say that it passed the test in terms of our bump course there. Now for our slalom course. And one thing I've noticed in the past, pretty much any vehicle, especially with a sloshing water tank in the back, is the body rolls pretty bad. Get all that weight back there. So I'm curious to see how these work. And in the past, I've had some pretty good success with them, so I don't really see a reason that won't be the case with these, especially since these are 7500s. You got the big dogs under there, so we'll get some speed and get our wheels turning here, and it feels good. Really no different than how it would feel from the factory. A little bit of body roll, don't get me wrong, but I mean that's inevitable. And you know, even if you know, you start to do that, or you feel like, you know, you're not as supported as you want to be, or things of that nature, these are adjustable. So you can kind of change the pressures and fine tune them to your particular driving style. Now that we're done, you know, driving around and getting a feel for the airbags, let's actually see how they look installed underneath our truck. So this is what we're working with here. And with these being the 7500 series, these are a really big airbag. So, you know, I feel like it's appropriate for a truck of this size. Good load carrying capacity of 7,500 pounds. Keep in mind though, that's just what they can handle. It's not going to add capacity to your truck, if that makes sense. But yeah, the way these are going to work is they're going to fill that gap in between your axle tube and your frame and provide all that support, right? As opposed to what was there before, this is just your factory Johns bumper that bolts up. And this literally provides no additional support. This is just there to prevent your suspension from bottoming out. So definitely an upgrade in terms of you know, how our truck's gonna ride and carry the weight and everything else along those lines. When it comes to airbags, one of the really cool things about them is how adjustable they are. So with these, you can go from 5 to 100 PSI. So you have a lot of range there. And, you know, depending on your load, you know, if you got a medium-sized load and I only have to run 10, 20 pounds, if you got something really heavy, you might bump it up to 50 or 60. So, you know, you can change things up and really dial it in and fine-tune it. But, you know, that could be called one of the downsides, I guess you could say, to an airbag. Not really a downside, but something you need to think about, and that's maintenance. So these are going to require a minimum of 5 PSI in the bags at all times. So, you know, you want to be able to do that and stay on top of that, or else your airbag could potentially be compromised over time and create a safety issue there. So something to think about. One of the things, though, you can do to make it easier, like our neighbor did here today, is install a compressor. And a lot of times those compressors, you can set them up to where they automatically kind of kick on when the bag's low at a pressure that you set at. So you don't have to think about it. You know, you get in the truck, turn the key, if it's low, it does its thing and keeps everything going for you. And then not to mention it makes adjustments really easy as well. And just to kind of compare the airbags to other things, you know, if you're not looking to deal with any of that type of stuff, there are different options, you know, Timbrins, Sumo Springs. Essentially what those are a big Johns bumper. I mean, there's more to them than that, but kind of the gist of it. And they'll fill the void there the same way. A lot of them won't make contact until you put weight on it, and then if you need the support, it gives it to you. Thing is with those, you know, they're not adjustable, so you kind of get what you get when it comes to that. But on the same note as well, there's not going to be any maintenance or really nothing to think about. You put them on and you're done. So a lot of options in terms of what you can do to improve your truck's suspension. Just wanted to throw out too, if you are interested in the compressor, the one that we've had a lot of luck with, and the one that our neighbor got here today is the Airlift Wireless Air Easy Mount. Works out super good, you know, bolts up to the frame perfectly, super easy install, and it's got a wireless remote too, so you don't have to drill into your dash or anything. So just wanted to mention that. If you want to talk about trucks that are lifted, it's pretty popular to put lift kits on these things and get them way up in the air and everything. And if yours is lifted in the back, there is a solution, because you just don't want to put the airbags back there. You could potentially tear them, you know, from stretching them apart so much. So they actually make some spacer rings, I guess you could call them, that you can pick up separately and size them appropriately to the size lift kit that you have back here. So if that's something that you're running into, definitely check those out. I do just want to touch base on some of the fitment questions. A lot of people wonder if these are going to work with you know, the factory prep package and gooseneck and fifth wheel hitches, and the answer is yes. They you know, design the bracketry and stuff to where it'll work in conjunction with that. It's not really a big deal. But this particular kit, if you happen to have a dually, the kit isn't going to work. This is designed for single rear wheels, and this kit's also designed for trucks with four-wheel drive. But not a huge deal if you happen to have a two-wheel drive or you know, a dually. There's other options available. So just see our fit guide, and you can get a kit that's very similar, that's specifically designed to work with your particular setup. So at the end of the day, you know, nice kit. I like airlift stuff. You know, never really running any issues with them for the most part, and they work. You know, that adjustability you can have at hand really makes your ride quality that much better. But as far as the installation goes, these aren't the worst ones that I've done, nor the easiest. Really, how they bolt up to the truck and everything's pretty straightforward. Some of the more confusing parts was just trying to figure out all the brackets and stuff, because you got to build this whole assembly, and there's quite a few parts actually. But you know, take your time, think things through, and you really shouldn't run into too many issues. So hopefully our video can help you out a little bit there too, make it easier on you. So if you'd like to see how that's done, feel free to stick around. We'll go ahead and put these on together now. To begin our installation, we're going to be here underneath the back of our truck. And what you want to do is just temporarily remove your spare tire. That way, just gives us a lot more room to work. Once we're all done, it'll obviously go back up. And then you can jack up your truck's frame. So for those of you that are doing this on the ground, you want to jack the truck up in a way to where just the frame goes up and your wheels will stay on the ground. And what you're trying to do is increase the distance between the top of your axle tube to the bottom of your frame. Gives you a bigger space, makes it easier to get the airbag in and whatnot. So once you have that done, then we can go ahead and start taking off a couple parts. So you're gonna have your factory jounce bumper, and we need to remove it. So I have a 15mm socket. You're gonna have a nut on each side. We'll get that out of the way because we won't be reusing it. And then those keepers there, they're kind of stuck in there. We need to pop them out too. So you can just take a flathead screwdriver, kind of pry it out on one side. Usually come right out. So I'm gonna pull out like that. I'll do the same thing with this one. Now we can take these new provided keepers, I guess that's what I call them, and pop them into the original opening. So I popped this one in already. And the way these work, essentially you just push them right into place. Sometimes they can be pretty tight. So if that happens, just take a screwdriver and get it into position. So now we can take this bracket here and kind of prepare this to put it in place. So you are going to want to position this in a certain orientation here. So let's say if this is the front of our truck and we're on the driver's side, you want this slotted hole here in the center to face towards the front of the truck, and then you want this U-shaped cutout to face towards the center of our truck, so facing inboard. So that's how I have it set up. Then what you're going to do is take these carriage bolts and drop them through the square holes. And what I like to do is just take a piece of tape and kind of tape it to there. That way, when we go to bolt everything up and everything, these don't move around and try to come out. It just makes it a little bit easier a little bit later on. So that way they don't, you know, when you're trying to screw it, the bolt isn't pushing up and out of the way nearly as bad. So I'll get this one in. tape on that. And then what we can do is go underneath the truck and get this bolted up. With our bracket fixed up here, we can line the holes up in it with those keepers that we put in the frame a minute ago. And you're going to use these bolts here. So they have the Allen head center on them. And I'm just going to get both these started by hand for now, and then we can come back and tighten them up. To tighten these, the proper size Allen key that I'm using is a 6mm. So we're going to come back and tighten and torque these down, and you can find all the torque specs listed in the instructions. Now we can assemble our air spring. So if you look on one side of it, there's going to be 3 places that you can thread into. The bottom will only have 2. We're going to be working with the top. This one here, you're going to take your air fitting and get that threaded in. Make sure it's going in straight and everything. And you're going to get this as tight as you can by hand. And then you can take a 1/2-inch wrench and give it about an extra turn and a half. So let's see, there's about 1. I go a little bit extra usually if it feels like I can. So about a turn and a half. And then you can take one of the roll plates and slide that right on top. Now you can take this plate and you have to position this in the proper way as well. So again, say if I'm the front of the truck, this is the, inward side of the truck. Got these 2 holes as will face forward. So pretty straightforward. Then you want to take a carriage bolt and from the bottom up, put it through that hole, and I taped it just like the others. And those are going to line up with our airbag and our roll plate. And what you're going to do is take these finer thread bolts, a split lock washer and a flat washer, and get both these started hand tight. Then you want to push this plate up all the way forward. Come back with a 9/16, snug them down, and then I'll grab my torque wrench and completely torque them. Now we can take our deal here, flip it upside down, take your roll plate, the other one, pop that on. Then you could take your lower bracket, all right, and this hole here. So on one side of the bracket you'll have 2 square holes. You're going to take a carriage bolt, put it in, and tape it up like that. And then you're going to set this on top of the bag. That's how it will go. I believe we're going to have to take some real long carriage bolts though and get them in through here in just a moment. But for now, you can take this piece, slide that over, and then take a flange nut, and we'll get that kind of tight, not super tight though. You still want to be able to move that around. And so what I'll do is grab the bolts, get them in here, and then we'll be able to bolt this up. So we got our super long carriage bolts, taped them up just like the others. So that's how they come through. And then take that assembly and line it up. We'll take the fine thread bolts, split lock washer and a flat washer. Get them started. Just like the other ones, push it up as far as you can. It's not going to go the complete length of that slot there because the head of the carriage bolt ends up hitting the roll plate. But just push it up until it hits, and then we'll tighten these down and torque them. At this point, you can grab this deal here, and the kit, they give you 3 different types or sizes of these, and what one you're going to use is going to dictate on your rear axle essentially. I believe there's a setup for the trimmer package, and then a 3.5-inch axle and a 4-inch axle tube. We have the 4-inch, so that's this is the one we're using, and it's going to go line up with this. You take a carriage bolt, push that through, flange nut, and I get this hand tied as well because sometimes, you know, I'll come back and tighten this down once it's on there because sometimes this might have to shift a little bit or move a little bit to get it to fit exactly how you want. So don't tighten it all the way down just yet. Back underneath the truck, just over here on the driver's side, before we get our assembly in place, we need to move our wheel speed sensor cable. That way it doesn't interfere with our airbag assembly. Really easy though. You have this bracket and you have a fastener kind of holding the cable to the bracket. Literally all you're going to do is pry that out and then just take the cable and just zip tie it essentially on this side of the brake line. That way it just keeps out of the way. So moving up now, driver's side frame, we're going to have this bracket here holding our brake lines and stuff. We need to take that off, so there's going to be a 13mm head bolt there, and then one just on the other side. I grab my socket and get those pulled out. You can kind of move this out of the way, and this hole here close to the back of the truck, you can take this this stud, and I marked it. I measured it from the top and about 1.2 inches down to the base. That way we know how much to leave protruding out from the frame. So I'm just gonna take this and thread this in there. And I was hoping to be able to do this by hand. It's a little tight, so I'm gonna grab an Allen key. That way I can put it in the end and tighten it down more. In case you're wondering, that is a 5mm Allen key I'm using here. Tighten that down about like that. And then we can take our bracket and our upper bracket. And I want to mention, our truck does not have a fifth wheel or gooseneck or anything like that on it. If yours does, even if it's from the factory, they give you ways to mount up these upper brackets. So just see your instructions. It's pretty straightforward, but this one is going to slide up here. We're trying to get that slotted part over our stud deal that we just put in. I can manage here. About like that, and then our brake line bracket, we should be able to kind of weasel this out and get it back in place, so that'll go back over that stud that we just put in. Everything's just super tight. There we go. Got it up there. And then you want to take the M10 flange nut. So pay attention, because the flange nuts will look all the same. If you had one that was a little harder to get going, that's probably the M10 one. So take that, put it over the stud that we put in, and we'll just get it hand tight. So this part of our bracket, you can see the hole lines up the hole there in our frame. So you're gonna take the big bolt they give you, flat washer, and from the outside in, push that through the bracket, another flat washer, and the big nylon lock nut. Now we can take our airbag assembly and try to sneak this thing in here. Over here on the driver's side, if I can get this thing to go in, it's kind of hitting on some of our wires and stuff, so be conscious of that. You obviously just don't want to rip this thing right in here. Finesse it in. Pretty close there, but what I was saying, over here on the driver's side, you can see this carriage bolt where our brake line is. Over here, the carriage bolt's gonna go in between the brake line and the axle housing. On the passenger side, the brake line sits a lot tighter, and so the carriage bolt will go, you know, over it this way. So the brake line will be in between the carriage bolt and the axle tube, but everything's looking pretty good. We got it roughly lined up and how we want it, so we can grab some more hardware and get everything going again. At this point, we can grab this big U-bolt, and this is going to wrap around your leaf spring stack, or this portion of it, I guess you could say. But the lower bracket's going to have 3 holes. You want to put it in the very top hole, and flat washer, nylon lock nut, and tight. Same on other side. You can go ahead, grab our saddle strap now. That'll go on these long carriage bolts. Get both going here. Take a flat washer, nylon lock nut, and with these, we'll just get them hand tight as well. So what I've done is loosened up our jack a little bit. That way we could close the gap just a hair, and our upper bracket is now starting to line up with the bracket on top of the airbag, and the carriage bolts are just kind of starting to penetrate through. So you might have to, you know, kind of assist it a little bit there. And all the carriage bolts that we put up here on this bracket, I think there's one here, one in the middle, and then 2 towards the front. All those are going to receive a flange nut. So this started hand tight, and if you get one of them going and having a hard time getting the other ones going, you can always tighten this one up and maybe might pull everything together. Either way, you know, finesse everything in and get all of the flange nuts started. So now we can essentially just snug everything down. I'm going to start with our U-bolt here, and when you're doing this, you know, you want to run the nut down evenly on each side. So go for a little bit on this side, alternate back and forth. That way it draws everything together evenly. And you know, I don't know if there's a right or a wrong way to tighten all this down per se, but I'm going to do this first, and then the ones up here, and then the big bracket up top, and then I'll save this one essentially for last. So yeah, that's what I'll do. 9/16 deep well, run this down. Now that we have everything snugged up, we can come back and torque down all of our hardware to the amount specified in the instructions. Once everything's torqued down, you know, make sure, just take a quick look at everything. Make sure your lines aren't getting pinched or, you know, going to interfere with the airbags. I do suggest one of these tubes that run up through here is a vent tube, and it was kind of close, so I just kind of zip tied it up to our other brake line there just to kind of hold it out of the way a little bit. Yeah, that's really all there is to it to getting the bag on, but now we can start to run and set up our airline. So you're gonna grab your airline and you can cut it in half essentially. Since the passenger side line will have to get routed a few more feet, a little bit longer, you know, you can always cut one side short. That's what I did. The shorter side being the driver's side, since you don't have to go as far. And when you cut this, you want to make sure that you have a good clean cut. So you want to avoid using a regular old pair of snips because it'll kind of crease it and potentially leak. So you can use a tool like this, or even a tubing cutter, or even just a razor edge, and you know, you put that on a piece of wood, push down, cut it straight. So that's about how you want it to look. Real clean, no burrs on it, anything along those lines. So with this done, now we can get it plugged into the bag and start to route it. So here's our fitting, and these are just quick connects. So essentially you take the tube, just line it up and push it right into place. You'll feel it kind of snap into place, and once it does that, you know it's good. But now what I'll do is route our airline towards the back of our truck, and I'll show you the path I took once I have that done. So our line comes out here, and when you do this, obviously you want to avoid any hot or moving parts the best you can, or any super sharp edges. So I just kind of put a bend in our line here and use some zip ties to secure it to some factory wiring. Had a little bit of extra, so I just looped it up, and it comes and drops down right through this opening, and that'll come down to the outside of our hitch essentially. So here's where our line comes out, and I'm using this bracket that just zip ties around the hitch. This doesn't come with it, but I believe you can find these, or you know, you don't even have to do it this way. You can run it to your screws that hold on your license plate. You can put it back on your bumper step, kind of where your license plate area is. Pretty much whatever you see fit. I had this laying around, so that's what I did. But what you're gonna do, take your line and put a nut on it, and I just always run these all the way down. And then you're gonna have a star washer. Put that on and push that through your mounting point. I have a few more pieces of hardware here. I have a rubber type washer. Put that on, and a flat washer, and then another nut. And you could take a 1/2 inch or even a 13 millimeter and just tighten this down. Just do them by hand, you know, you don't have to crank down on them by any means, just get them snug. And then you can go ahead and repeat that same process over here on the passenger side to get that airbag installed. Essentially, same deal. Couple of small things are different. One of them, the upper bracket. So if you remember on the driver's side, we had the one big nut and bolt we used, and the other one we had to deal with the brake lines and stuff. You don't have to do that over here. So over here, I just use another big bolt. Really about it. They do give you a heat shield as well. So this piece and some clamps, and you just clamp that to your muffler or part of the exhaust closest to the airbag. That way it just helps protect it from heat. And then they also give you a sleeve here, this piece that you put on the airline before you plug it in, and that just helps keep it protected from heat as well. But while we're right here, might as well show you the path that I took to route our airline over. So pretty much the same deal. I just ran it along our frame here, where it comes down, and then just along the back of this beam, and drops down in that same opening and goes to that mounting bracket. And I secured it the same exact way we did the other one. So once everything's done, we can air up our bags. Try to put about 40 to 60 pounds air in it. That way we can check for leaks and make sure we don't have any clearance issues. You want to make sure you have good clearance around the actual airbag on both sides, which we do. And then to check for leaks, you can obviously listen for it if you hear air leaking, you got an issue. Sometimes you can't always hear it though, so you can take some soapy water and spray down all your fittings and whatnot. And what you're looking for is for bubbles to rapidly form and continuously form. If that's the case, you know you got a leak, and you can let the air out of the system, pull your line out of the fitting, recut it, plug it back in, and check it again. But from the looks of it, I think we're in pretty good shape. So that's really about it. And that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Airlift 7500 XL air helper springs for the rear axle on our 2022 Ford F-350.